Commander Marcus Cole had seen many strange things in his 15 years of military service, but nothing prepared him for the day he met Princess Varashi of the Etherian Dominion. The diplomatic station called Covenant Prime floated in neutral space, a massive structure where all the great powers of the galaxy came to talk and trade and sometimes argue. Marcus stood at attention in his crisp Terran Alliance uniform, waiting outside the royal chambers while politicians decided his fate. He was 42 years old, born on Earth in a small town that no longer existed after the climate wars. He had fought in 3 conflicts, saved countless lives, and earned every medal the Alliance could give him. But none of that seemed to matter to the aliens who walked past him in the corridor, their eyes sliding over him like he was furniture. The door finally opened, and a Terran diplomat waved him inside. The room was filled with beings from a dozen different worlds, but Marcus only had eyes for the creature at the center. Princess Varashi stood nearly 8 feet tall, her body made of something that looked like liquid silver given form. Her skin shifted and flowed with inner light, and her eyes were pools of deep violet that seemed to look right through him. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to witness, like staring at a star. "This is the human?" she asked, and her voice sounded like wind chimes caught in a storm. "Commander Marcus Cole, Your Highness," the diplomat said nervously. 15 years of Special Forces experience, expert in close protection, hand-to-hand combat, and tactical response. The princess moved closer, and Marcus felt the hair on his arms stand up from some kind of energy field around her. She circled him slowly, examining him the way a scientist might examine an insect. "You creatures live what, 80 cycles?" she asked. How can something so temporary understand the weight of protecting an immortal life? Marcus met her glowing eyes without flinching. "Maybe that is exactly why I can, Your Highness." She tilted her head, surprised that he had spoken. "Explain." "You have lived for thousands of years," Marcus said calmly. "Death is an abstract concept to you, something that happens to other people. But I wake up every morning knowing my time is limited. I understand what it means to lose everything because I have something to lose. That makes me careful, that makes me serious, and that makes me very good at keeping people alive." The room went silent. No one spoke to Etherian royalty this way, especially not a human. The Etherians considered humanity to be one of the youngest and most primitive species in the galaxy, barely worth noticing. But Princess Varashi did something unexpected. She laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. "You are bold for such a small creature," she said. "Very well, human. You will be my shadow. Try not to die too quickly." That was how it began. The first few weeks were difficult. Varashi ignored Marcus completely, treating him like a piece of equipment rather than a person. She spoke about him to others as if he could not hear, calling him the human or the temporary one, or sometimes just it. Marcus did not let it bother him. He had a job to do, and he did it well. He studied Etherian customs and language. He learned to read the patterns of light that moved across their skin, understanding that blue meant calm, green meant curiosity, and red meant danger. He mapped every room she entered, identified every threat, and positioned himself to respond to any attack. The assassination attempts had already happened 3 times before Marcus arrived. The Void Syndicate, a terrorist group that wanted to tear the Etherian Dominion apart, had made the princess their primary target. They believed that killing her would break the Emperor and plunge the Dominion into chaos. 3 months into his assignment, Marcus proved his worth. They were attending a diplomatic dinner on a space station near the border. Marcus noticed a server whose movements were too precise, too military. When the server reached under his tray, Marcus was already moving. He crossed 12 feet in less than a second, tackling the princess to the ground as a plasma bolt scorched the air where her head had been. Before anyone else could react, Marcus had disarmed the assassin and pinned him to the floor. "Threat neutralized," he said calmly, not even breathing hard. Varashi stared up at him from the floor, her silver skin flickering with colors he had never seen before. "You moved before I even sensed danger," she whispered. "How?" "I watched his eyes," Marcus said, helping her to her feet. "He looked at you the way a predator looks at prey. I have seen that look before." From that day forward, things began to change. Varashi started speaking to Marcus directly instead of around him. She asked questions about Earth, about human customs, about his family. She was fascinated by the concept of parents who died before their children grew old, of friends who aged at the same rate, of love that lasted decades instead of millennia. "Do you not find it terrifying?" she asked one night as they traveled between star systems. "Knowing that everything you love will end?" Marcus thought about the question carefully. "It makes every moment precious," he said. "When you have forever, I think maybe nothing feels special. But when you only have a little time, every sunrise matters. Every laugh with a friend matters. Every quiet moment matters. We do not love less because we die. We love more because of it." Varashi was quiet for a long time after that. 18 months passed. The princess and her human bodyguard had become something strange and wonderful. They were not quite friends because the gap between their worlds was too vast. But they were also more than guardian and charge. Marcus had learned to read every shade of her bioluminescence. Varashi had learned that humans expressed emotion through tiny movements of their faces, and she had become expert at reading his. They could communicate across a crowded room with just a glance. Other species noticed. Ambassadors and diplomats watched them with curiosity and confusion. How had this primitive, short-lived creature earned the attention of an immortal princess? What did she see in him? The answer was something the galaxy had not yet learned to understand. Humans were different. They formed bonds with terrifying speed and held on to them with impossible strength. They would die for strangers, fight for friends, and sacrifice everything for those they loved. The Etherians called it a weakness, this desperate attachment to other beings. They were wrong. It was humanity's greatest strength. And soon, the entire galaxy would learn this lesson in the most painful way possible. The Grand Symposium was the most important event in Etherian history, a celebration that happened only once every 1,000 years. This year marked the 10,000th anniversary of the Dominion, and every powerful being in the galaxy had come to witness it. The Crystal Amphitheater on Etherian Prime was the most beautiful structure Marcus had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that sang with harmonic frequencies, and the ceiling opened to show a sky filled with 3 moons and countless stars. Thousands of guests filled the seats, representing hundreds of species from across known space. Princess Varashi stood on the central stage, preparing to lead the symphony of stars. Her silver form glowed brighter than Marcus had ever seen, and waves of color rippled across her skin. She was nervous, he could tell, though no one else would have noticed. Marcus stood in the shadows at the edge of the stage, his eyes constantly moving. Something felt wrong tonight. The security seemed tight, with royal guards positioned at every entrance and scanners checking every guest. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming. He touched the communication device in his ear. "Control, this is Cole. I want another sweep of the perimeter." "Copy that, Commander," came the reply. "Scanners show all clear." But scanners could be fooled and guards could be bought. The ceremony began. Varashi raised her arms and her voice filled the amphitheater, a song that made the crystals resonate and the air itself vibrate with power. It was hauntingly beautiful, and even Marcus, who had no understanding of Etherian music, felt tears forming in his eyes. That was when he saw it. A guard near the east entrance had moved his hand to his weapon. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but Marcus had spent 18 months watching for exactly this kind of thing. The guard was not checking his equipment. He was preparing to draw. Marcus was already running. "Contact east," he shouted into his communicator. Multiple threats. The amphitheater exploded into chaos. 17 figures threw off their disguises and opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, and screams filled the beautiful space. Guests dove for cover as the attackers pushed toward the stage. 2 of the attackers were wearing Royal Guard uniforms. They had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Marcus reached Varashi just as the first assassin fired. He grabbed her arm and pulled her down, feeling the heat of the plasma bolt as it passed inches from his head. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "Marcus, there are too many," Varashi cried. Her light had turned sharp violet, the color of fear. "Then I will have to work fast." He drew his sidearm and dropped 3 attackers in 4 seconds. His combat implants fed him information, highlighting threats and calculating angles. He moved Varashi toward the emergency exit, keeping his body between her and the attackers at all times. But the Void Syndicate had planned this assault carefully. More attackers appeared at the exit, cutting off their escape. Marcus was forced back toward the stage, surrounded on all sides. "Commander Cole," a voice crackled in his ear. "Reinforcements are 2 minutes out." 2 minutes. That was an eternity in a firefight. Marcus made a decision. He pushed Varashi into a small alcove behind the stage, a space barely large enough for her to crouch. "Stay here," he said. "Do not move until I come for you." "Marcus, what are you doing?" He smiled at her, a real smile that reached his eyes. "My job, Your Highness." Then he stepped out to face the attackers alone. What happened next would become legend across the galaxy. Marcus Cole, a single human with a standard sidearm and basic combat implants, held off 11 attackers for 97 seconds. He moved like water, flowing between cover points and taking precise shots. He used the acoustics of the crystal amphitheater to confuse his enemies, making them shoot at echoes while he flanked them. 7 attackers fell before they even knew where he was. But he could not win. The numbers were too great, and his ammunition was running low. When the 12th attacker appeared behind him, Marcus had no time to turn. The plasma bolt hit him in the back. He fell to one knee but did not stop fighting. He shot the attacker who had wounded him, then 2 more who tried to rush the alcove. His body was failing, alarms screaming in his implants, but he refused to fall. And then the lead assassin appeared. He was a tall creature, not Etherean, but something older and darker. He carried a disruptor weapon, a device specifically designed to destroy beings made of energy. One shot would scatter Varashi across the quantum field, ending her existence completely. "Move aside, human," the assassin said. "You have fought well, but this is over. Give me the princess, and I will let you live." Marcus stood between the assassin and the alcove, blood soaking through his uniform. "No," the assassin sighed. "You would die for her? She's not even your species. She would not do the same for you." "You are wrong," Marcus said. "But even if you were right, it would not matter. I made a promise. I do not break my promises." The assassin raised his weapon. "Then die with your promise." The disruptor fired. Marcus threw himself into the path of the beam. It was designed to disperse Etherean energy, but against a human body, it did something far worse. It cooked him from the inside, destroying his organs instantly. But Marcus Cole did not fall. With the last strength in his dying body, he raised his weapon and fired 3 times. Each shot found its mark. The assassin collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. Only then did Marcus allow himself to fall. Varashi caught him before he could hit the floor. She pulled him into her arms, her silver skin flickering with that impossible white light. "Marcus!" she screamed. No. Your medics are coming. Hold on." He looked up at her, his vision fading. "Was not the plan," he managed, blood on his lips. "Job was to keep you safe. This is not acceptable." Tears were falling from her eyes. Actual liquid tears, something Etherians were not supposed to be able to produce. "You were supposed to stay with me. You cannot leave." "Vyra," he whispered, using her name for the first time. "It is okay. This is what humans do. For the people we love." His hand reached up to touch her face, leaving a smear of red against her silver skin. "Find someone new to argue with," he said, and somehow he was still smiling. "Someone who will not call you Your Highness all the time." "Marcus, please!" But his eyes had already closed. Commander Marcus Cole died at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. He died in the arms of an alien princess who had never wept before in her 3,000 years of existence. He died doing exactly what he had promised to do. He died a human. The medical bay on Etherian Prime was cold and white and silent. The body of Commander Marcus Cole lay on a metal table covered by a simple cloth. His face was peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. Princess Varashi had not left his side for 9 days. The physicians had tried to make her eat, but she refused. The advisors had tried to make her attend to her duties, but she ignored them. Even her father, Emperor Thalos himself, had commanded her to leave the medical bay. But for the first time in her 3,000 years of life, she had disobeyed. She simply sat beside the body of her human bodyguard, holding his cold hand in her silver fingers, and wept. No one knew what to do. Etherians did not grieve like this. They were immortal beings who had seen countless deaths over the millennia. They had learned to accept loss as a natural part of existence. When someone died, they honored them with a brief ceremony and then continued with their lives. But Varashi could not continue. Something inside her had broken, something she had not even known existed. On the 10th day, Emperor Thalos came to the medical bay himself. He was ancient, even by Etherian standards, his light dimmed by age to a soft gold. He had ruled for 8,000 years and had never seen anything like this. "Daughter," he said gently, "you must let him go. His people wish to take his body home." Varashi looked up at her father with empty eyes. "How?" she whispered. "How do I let him go when he never let me go? He stood in front of death itself rather than abandon me. How can I do less for him? He was a soldier. He did his duty. That is all. No." Varashi stood suddenly, her light flaring. "That is not all. You did not see his face when the assassin offered to spare him. He could have walked away. He could have lived another 40 years. But he chose to die instead. Not for duty, father, for me." The emperor was silent. "We have lived so long," Varashi continued, her voice breaking. "We have forgotten what it means to risk everything. We speak of sacrifice as if it cost us nothing, but what have we ever truly given? He had perhaps 40 years remaining, father. 40 years of sunrises and laughter and love. And he threw them all away in one moment because I mattered more to him than his own existence." She fell to her knees beside the table. "How can I honor that? How can I possibly honor that?" The emperor had no answer. Word of the princess and her humans spread across the galaxy. Diplomats and journalists gathered on Etherian Prime, all wanting to witness this strange spectacle. An immortal being brought low by the death of a creature who should have meant nothing to her. The Terran Alliance sent representatives to retrieve their fallen soldier. They expected resistance, political complications, perhaps even a diplomatic incident. What they found instead was a princess who personally carried the body to their ship. He told me about his family, Varashi said to the Terran ambassador. A sister on Earth, a niece he never met. Please tell them he spoke of them often. Please tell him he loved them even from so far away. The ambassador, a hardened diplomat who had negotiated treaties and ended wars, found himself unable to speak. He simply nodded. The galactic news networks broadcast the scene to billions of viewers. They showed the Silver Princess, her light so dim she was almost invisible, gently placing the body of her human protector into a stasis pod. They showed her pressing her forehead to his one final time, leaving a mark of silver light on his skin. And then they showed her speech. Varashi stood before the gathered diplomats and journalists, her voice barely louder than a whisper, but carrying to every corner of the room. You are all wondering why I grieve so deeply for a human, she began. I have heard the whispers. I know what you think. He was temporary, you say. Brief, you say. Why should an immortal weep for a creature that would have died in a few decades anyway? She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was stronger. Because you do not understand what his brevity meant. You see human lives as small because they are short. But you are wrong. They are not small. They are concentrated. The room was silent. We live for millennia, and we spread ourselves thin across the centuries. We feel less because we have time to feel later. We risk less because there is always tomorrow. But humans have no tomorrow. Not really. Every day might be their last. Varashi's light began to return, flickering with colors that had no names. And so they love with their whole being. They fight with everything they have. They form bonds in days that we cannot form in centuries. Marcus Cole knew me for 18 months, and in that time he learned to read every shade of my light. He memorized my fears and my hopes and my dreams. He gave me more attention in 18 months than anyone else has given me in 3,000 years. Tears fell down her silver face. He knew he was temporary. He knew every moment with me was borrowed time. And he gave every single one of those moments willingly. He chose me over the decades he would never have. Do you understand what that means? He chose to die so that I could live. Not because he had centuries to spare, but because he had only years, and he spent them all on me. She looked directly at the cameras. You call humans primitive. You call them brief and unimportant. But I tell you now, the most important being I have ever known was a human who lived for 42 years. And I will spend the rest of my immortal existence trying to be worthy of his sacrifice. The speech ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. The ancient races who had dismissed humanity for decades suddenly found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. The younger species who had looked up to the Etherians as paragons of wisdom saw them, humbled by the death of a single human soldier. And humanity itself, scattered across 100 colony worlds, felt something shift in their collective consciousness. For the first time since they had joined the galactic community, someone had truly understood them. Someone had seen their brief lives not as a weakness, but as a source of unimaginable strength. The princess had not just mourned Marcus Cole. She had shown the entire galaxy what it meant to love like a human. And nothing would ever be the same. The Void Syndicate had expected the galaxy to forget. They had expected the death of one human to fade into obscurity within weeks, replaced by new scandals and political dramas. They had miscalculated more badly than any terrorist organization in galactic history. 3 weeks after the assassination attempt, the Terran Alliance made an announcement that sent shockwaves through every corner of known space. They were not demanding war. They were not seeking revenge. Instead, they were doing something far more devastating. They released everything. The full service record of Commander Marcus Cole appeared on every news network simultaneously. Every mission he had completed, every life he had saved, every medal he had earned. They showed footage of him training young soldiers, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to protect. They showed interviews with people he had rescued over the years, civilians and soldiers and diplomats who owed their lives to his skill and courage. But most importantly, they released his personal letters. Marcus had written to his sister Elena every week for 15 years. He had never missed a single week, not even when he was fighting in war zones or stationed on the far side of the galaxy. The letters were simple and honest, full of small observations about the universe and questions about his family back home. One letter in particular went viral across every species and every world. It had been written 6 months into his assignment with Princess Varashi. "Dear Elena," he had written, "I know this sounds crazy, but I think I am finally doing something important. The princess is difficult and proud, and sometimes she looks at me like I am an insect. But she is also scared. I can see it in the way her light flickers when she thinks no one is watching. She has lived for 3,000 years, and she is terrified of living for 3,000 more. She does not know how to be happy with just one day. I want to teach her. I want to show her that a single good moment is worth more than an eternity of emptiness. Maybe that is why humans were meant to meet aliens. Not to learn from them, but to remind them what it means to be alive." Across the galaxy, beings who had never thought twice about humanity began to see them differently. The Cathari Collective was the first to respond. They were ancient warriors, a species that had been fighting and dying since before humans had learned to use tools. Their culture was built on concepts of honor and debt and sacrifice. When they heard what Marcus Cole had done, something stirred in their collective memory. The Cathari War Master addressed the Galactic Concord personally. "We have lived for eons," he said, his voice rumbling through the great chamber. "We have fought 10,000 wars and buried millions of our finest warriors. But somewhere along the way, we forgot why we fought. We grew complacent. We began to see life as cheap because we had so much of it." He bowed his massive head. "This human, this brief spark of existence, has reminded us of what we once were. He did not fight because he had time to spare. He fought because he had something worth dying for. We declare a blood debt against the Void Syndicate. They have stolen something precious from the galaxy, and they will pay." Other species followed. The Mo'odari, peaceful scholars who had not engaged in conflict for 800 years, announced they would provide intelligence support to track down every Syndicate Sao. The Vresh Hegemony, bitter rivals of the Terran Alliance, declared a temporary alliance for the sole purpose of dismantling the terrorist organization. Even the mysterious architects, being so old and powerful that they rarely spoke to younger races, sent a single message to the Concord: justice. The Void Syndicate had thought themselves untouchable. They had hidden in the dark spaces between stars for centuries, striking and retreating before anyone could respond. But now there was nowhere to hide. 17 species coordinated the largest manhunt in galactic history. Within 2 months, every leader of the Syndicate had been captured or killed. Their bases were destroyed, their funding was seized, and their ideology was exposed as hollow and cowardly. The final Syndicate commander was brought before the Galactic Concord for trial. He was defiant until the end, screaming that the galaxy was weak and that his cause would rise again. Princess Varashi was given the honor of pronouncing sentence. She stood before the terrorist who had ordered the death of her friend, her light steady and cold. "You believed that killing one human would break us," she said. "Instead, you have united the galaxy in a way that nothing else could. You thought his death would be meaningless, but it has given more meaning to more lives than your entire pathetic movement ever could." She leaned closer. He told me once that humans measure success differently than other species. You do not count your victories by how many enemies you destroy. You count them by how many people you protect. By that measure, Marcus Cole achieved more in his 42 years than you will achieve if you live for 42,000. The terrorist was sentenced to permanent stasis, frozen forever in a moment of defeat. But the true victory was not the destruction of the Void Syndicate. The true victory was what happened in the hearts and minds of billions of beings across the galaxy. The Terran ambassador addressed the Concord one final time before the session ended. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, and she spoke without notes. 40 years ago, humanity joined this community as outsiders. You tolerated us because we were useful, but you did not respect us. You saw our short lives as a defect, something to be pitied. But I want you to understand something. She looked around the chamber at the representatives of 100 worlds. Marcus Cole was not special. Every human soldier, every human guardian, every human parent would have made the same choice. We do not love less because we die. We love more. We do not fear sacrifice because we have little time. We embrace it because every moment is precious. She smiled. You have 10,000 years to learn wisdom. We have 80 years to live it. And I promise you, when you understand the difference, you will never look at us the same way again. The chamber erupted in the loudest applause the Galactic Concord had ever heard. Humanity was no longer the primitive newcomers. They had become something far more important. They had become the teachers. 1 year had passed since the death of Commander Marcus Cole. The monument stood at the heart of Etherian Prime, visible from every corner of the capital city. It was a pillar of pure light, powered by Etherian technology, designed to burn for 10,000 years without fading. At its base, carved in 100 different languages, was a simple phrase from Earth. Some lives are measured in impact, not years. Thousands of pilgrims came every day to visit the memorial. They came from every species and every world, traveling across the vast distances of space just to stand in the presence of something they did not fully understand. Humans came to honor their fallen hero. Aliens came to try to comprehend what made him sacrifice everything. Princess Varashi stood at the base of the monument, her silver form restored to its full brightness. She had spent the past year doing things that no Etherian royal had ever done before. She had traveled to Earth and walked the streets of the town where Marcus was born. She had met his sister Elena and his niece Lily, and had sat with them for hours, sharing stories and memories. She had learned what it meant to be human. Now she was about to shock the galaxy one more time. The ceremony had drawn dignitaries from across known space. Emperor Thalvos sat in a place of honor, his ancient face unreadable. The Terran ambassador stood beside representatives from a dozen species. Journalists from every network pointed their cameras at the princess, waiting for her announcement. Varashi took a deep breath and began to speak. 1 year ago, I lost someone who showed me what it truly means to live, she said. For 3,000 years, I existed without understanding existence. I was immortal but empty, eternal but afraid. And then a human with barely 4 decades to his name taught me more about courage and love and purpose than all the wisdom of all the ages. Her light shifted through colors that made the crowd gasp. Today, I honor his memory with an action, not words. I am abdicating my position as heir to the Etherian dominion. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emperor Thalvos closed his eyes but did not interrupt. I will instead serve as the first Etherian ambassador to Earth. I will spend the rest of my existence, however many millennia that may be, learning from the species that taught an immortal the meaning of sacrifice. I will walk among humans. I will live at their pace. I will love the way they love, completely and without reservation. She raised her hand, and the light of the monument brightened. "But that is not all. I have used my personal fortune to establish the Cole Foundation. This organization will provide education, medical care, and support to human veterans and their families across Terran space. No human who serves the Concord will ever go unrecognized again. No human sacrifice will ever be forgotten." The applause began slowly and built to thunder. Varashi waited for silence before continuing. "The great powers of this galaxy have always measured worth in lifespan. We believed that time equaled wisdom, that age equaled value. We were fools." Her voice rang across the plaza. Marcus Cole had 42 years. In that time, he saved more lives than I have saved in 3,000. He formed deeper bonds than I had ever known. He faced death with a smile because he had something worth dying for. Tell me, which of us lived the fuller life? Tell me, which of us truly understood what it means to be alive? She stepped back from the podium. "I will spend my eternity trying to earn what he gave in an instant. And I invite every being in this galaxy to join me. Learn from the humans. Not their technology, not their strategies, but their hearts. Learn to love like you are dying, because in the end, we are all dying. Some of us just take longer than others." The ceremony ended, but Varashi did not leave immediately. She stood at the base of the monument, accepting visitors and answering questions. She hugged human families who had lost soldiers in service. She spoke with alien philosophers who wanted to understand her transformation. And then a small figure pushed through the crowd. She was 12 years old, with brown hair and eyes that looked exactly like her uncle's. Lily Cole had traveled across the galaxy with her mother Alina to attend this ceremony. She had been shy throughout the journey, overwhelmed by the attention and the strangeness of alien worlds. But now she walked straight up to Princess Varashi and held out a photograph. The image showed Marcus Cole in civilian clothes, laughing at something outside the frame. He was holding a baby in his arms, a tiny infant with curious eyes. The baby was Lily herself, captured in a moment of pure joy with an uncle she would never truly know. "He talked about you," Lily said softly. "In his letters. He said you were scared of being alive for so long. He said he wanted to show you it was worth it." Varashi's light turned that impossible white, brighter than the monument itself. She knelt down until she was at eye level with the girl. "He did," she whispered. "He showed me. Every day we spent together, he showed me." She took the photograph with trembling hands. "May I keep this?" Lily nodded. "Mom says you loved him. Is that true?" Varashi looked at the photograph, at the smiling face of the man who had changed everything. "Yes," she said. "I did not know it until he was gone, but yes. I loved him more than I thought possible. I will love him until the stars burn out." Lily hugged her, this small human child embracing an immortal princess. And Varashi hugged her back, understanding finally what Marcus had meant when he said that some bonds transcend time. 50 years later, the Galactic Concord formally amended its founding charter. Humanity was elevated from provisional member to founding species equivalent, an honor that had never been given to any species before. The reason was recorded in the great archives for all eternity, for teaching the galaxy that the brevity of existence is not a weakness, but the fire that forges the strongest bonds. And beside that entry, there was a small notation. This change was proposed by Ambassador Virashi of the Etherian Dominion, who has served humanity faithfully for 50 years and intends to continue for 50,000 more. When asked why she dedicated her eternal existence to a species so brief, she provided the following answer. "Because a human once dedicated his brief existence to me. I am simply returning the favor." In the great archives, historians would note that the shift began not with a war or a treaty, but with a single human who refused to let death stop him from doing his job. His name was Marcus Cole. He was a bodyguard, and he changed the galaxy forever.